Ronald Reagan-era drug war rhetoric is still with us, and so is the accompanying collateral damage. No kidding. That's the headline of an article, That Other War, written by my next guest. Here's his story. In 2008, as a tactical narcotics unit raided the home of her boyfriend, Anthony Terry, 26-year-old Tarika Wilson dropped to her knees in an upstairs bedroom, one arm over her head, the other clutching her infant son, Sincere. As the officers stormed the home, one opened fire on Terry's dogs. Another officer mistook those shots for hostile gunfire, and he himself opened up his weapon into the room where Tarika Wilson was kneeling. Tarika Wilson was killed. She was murdered. Her son lost a hand. That's just one example pointed out in this fantastic and disturbing article about drug raids gone bad, where innocent people lose their lives for no reason, as the article calls them, drug war collateral damage. Joining me now is Radley Balco, author of That Other War. Radley is also a senior editor at Reason magazine and one of the best followers in the country of police behavior gone wrong, gone criminal, gone unconstitutional. Radley, Happy New Year to you. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thanks for having me on again, Judge.
How many of these cases are there? I think I read about a couple that you wrote over the Christmas holidays, or at least that's when I got to read them, in recent times, of innocent people being killed by the police, either because they have the wrong house or the wrong apartment or the wrong person, or they relied on information from somebody who's utterly unworthy of reliance.
Well, I wrote a paper for the Cato Institute a few years ago that documented all of these raids gone wrong, both where innocent people were killed and where you had nonviolent drug offenders, you know, low-level pot dealers or pot smokers who were killed. And I found about 40 cases of a completely innocent person who had nothing to do with drugs or any, you know, major illegal activity being killed because of these police raids. And it's really, it is war. I mean, these are very low margin for error in these raids. They're volatile. There's highly confrontational. And, you know, the police or the people on the receiving end of these raids can easily make mistakes. And usually when they do, it ends in tragedy.
What happened in the Anthony Terry, Tarika Wilson case, the one that I recently read that I just spoke about in introducing you? I mean, who were they? What were they doing? Why were the police there? And how did Tarika get killed?
Well, Anthony Terry, Tarika Wilson's boyfriend, was actually a drug dealer. So they got the right house this time. But this is an example of even when the police do get the right house, of why these tactics are so really ill-advised, I guess is a kind of a minor or understatement. But so they did get the right house, but then you have this collateral damage. You have this, and, you know, maybe some people will say she wasn't innocent because she was living with a drug dealer, but, you know, certainly her son was innocent. But you have this person who wasn't involved in the drug trade who ends up getting killed. And this happens a lot. There have been several examples of children getting caught up in the crossfire of these raids. And, you know, the officer in this case was actually charged with manslaughter. And was acquitted, but to even be charged is pretty rare. It almost never happens that way. And Judge, I mean, one other thing I want to point out here is there's an inconsistency in the way that police officers are treated during these raids versus the way that the people on the receiving end are treated.
Absolutely.
Police officers are allowed to make mistakes. If you mistake a remote control for a gun or a T-shirt for a gun and kill a suspect in one of these raids, it's sort of written off to the volatile situation of the volatile circumstances of the raids. But if you're on the receiving end, if you wake up in the middle of the night and there are armed men in your home, and you mistakenly shoot one of them thinking they're criminals, and it turns out that they're police officers, you're not going to get cut any slack. I can run off a few cases off the top of my head where that's happened, and the person has been charged with murder. In one case, was sentenced to death, actually.
Wow. You know, it's almost inconceivable that these type of wanted murders could happen at the hands of the police and there is no outrage. Is it because the victim is usually a poor person in society on the low end of our demographics, or in the case of Tarika Wilson, By the way, it is no crime to have a boyfriend who is a criminal, nevertheless living with a drug dealer. Is it because they are almost pathetic, the people that are innocent victims here, that there is no outrage, that a government prosecutor doesn't go after the police, that there probably, Radley, aren't even wrongful death civil lawsuits filed by the family of these people against the government that dispatched the cops to their homes?
Well, Judge, I think it's worse than that, actually. I mean, there are some cases of middle and upper middle class people caught up in these raids, and even then, there's no change in policy, no change in procedures. I think the problem here is that for the last 30, 35 years, we've been told that we're fighting a war. Our politicians have described this drug prohibition as a war. They use war imagery, they use battlefield tactics, they use equipment on loan from the military, from the Pentagon. And when you start describing things in those sorts of terms, the public, the populace, starts to think of it as a war. And when you have war, you do have collateral damage. When we bomb Iraq and we bomb Afghanistan, we understand that innocent people are going to get killed by these bombs, and we sort of accept it as one of the consequences of war. Now, obviously, you and I don't believe that this is a war,
right,
and it shouldn't be a war, and it shouldn't be treated as a war. But I think all of this war rhetoric has really had an effect on the way the general population looks at drug prohibition.
I think you're right. I think, you know, I recently wrote a piece called The Case Against Military Tribunals, in which I argued that calling something a war, even if it has all the military paraphernalia involved, and even if it has human death, doesn't make it a war. One of the examples I said was, let's see, we have a war on drugs. Are they going to send drug dealers to Guantanamo Bay and put them before military tribunals? These are horrible people. Why should we let them have the same rights as the rest of us? I make the argument, of course, facetiously, but I can hear people who have propagated this nonsense that this is a war going to that next step.
Well, William Bennett, one of our drug czars under the first Bush administration, actually said at one point that drug dealers should be taken out and beheaded without a trial. He also mockingly referred to the idea that they deserve due process. Daryl Gates, the former police chief in Los Angeles, said drug users should be taken out into the street and shot without giving a trial. I mean, our politicians have really perpetuated this idea that I mean, look at the ONDCP likening drug use to terrorism, to support for terrorism. I mean, you were making the argument facetiously, but I don't think we're really that far away from the politicians sort of bumping the drug war up to that sort of level of government attention. Before
I let you go, one of the politicians himself was innocently caught up in this. Was there a case involving a mayor in Maryland who was innocently sitting in his own home? The next thing he knows, the police are murdering his Labrador retrievers and putting him up against the wall.
Yeah, Mayor Shai Calvo in Maryland, and I have to say, Mayor Calvo has been a phenomenal spokesperson for on this issue of police militarization and the drug war. And in fact, really to his credit, he really understood immediately what was going on here. That he was a wealthy white mayor, has some political power, had some clout, had a platform, and really immediately realized that he was unusual in that sense, and he had a chance to sort of go out and raise some awareness about this. And he actually got a bill passed in Maryland, the first of its kind in the country, that brings some transparency to this issue. When I've researched and reported this issue, one of the problems I've run into is it's very difficult to find out how many times SWAT teams are deployed, why they're deployed, what happens, how many drugs or weapons were found. And you can't really do a good sort of analysis of whether these tactics are useful, whether they are actually going after the hardened, heavily armed drug dealers, because the records just aren't there, and the police departments just don't keep track of this. So what Mayor Calvo did in Maryland was got a bill that requires every police agency in the state to submit a quarterly report to the Attorney General laying all this out. How many times was your SWAT team deployed? Was it for weapons or drugs? What did you find? Were there any pets killed? Were there any shots fired? And it's a great first start to bringing a little bit of transparency to this issue, so we can actually start doing a sort of a cost-benefit analysis of whether these tactics are appropriate.
Radley Balco, thanks for your good work, and thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thanks, Judge. Thanks for having me on.